Good morning or afternoon, everybody. It is your host, True Crime Stories, and today we're going to start off I guess you could say, unsolved serial killer stories or instances. I don't know how you want to call it, but as I have said, hi, Mr. Habs, welcome. As I have said on Twitter, this is going to be the last stream of the year where we go over the Zodiac Killer, which is a very interesting case, especially now that there has been an update. And the next is going to be the most infamous Jack the Ripper, and I will have a guest co-host for that. So that's going to be great. Dev End, I see you in the chat. Please DM me if you have a Twitter account, because the previous winner for the raffle or giveaway did not respond, and you ended up being the next in line after doing the roll again. So, Dev End, if you have the opportunity, send me a message in either Discord or on Twitter, and I will get you that book. And with that, let us begin. Now, obviously, I don't know of anybody who hasn't heard of the Zodiac Killer. This is by far one of the two most infamous cases of unsolved serial murders ever. I think the only one that I'm aware of that's really prevalent is obviously Jack the Ripper. I don't know of any others besides the two. There probably are some, but not nearly as prevalent. Not nearly as known in the public eye. And, well, there is still a lot of speculation for this one, but we're going to go from the top, go through everything that was known previously up until recently, and then we'll go over the recent updates of this case. So, if you're not familiar with the Zodiac Killer, which I highly think that anybody here is unfamiliar with them, that is the name of an American serial killer that operated in Northern California, which speculated between the 1960s and early 1970s. The name came from a bunch of letters and cards sent to the San Francisco Bay Area press, and those included several cryptograms or ciphers that took 51 years to decipher, to decrypt, and it was not done by law enforcement or government personnel, which is the most interesting part of this. There are really only 5 known cases that are attributed to the Zodiac Killer, and that is the murder of David Arthur Friday, who was 17 at the time, and Betty Lou Jensen, who was 16, on December 20th in 1968 on Lake Herman Road. Both were shot and killed by the Zodiac Killer, allegedly. The second case that is most known or is attributed to the Zodiac Killer is the murder of Michael Renault Maggio. I don't know how to pronounce that. He was 19 at the time, and 22-year-old Darlene Elizabeth Farron, which occurred on July 4th, 1969, in a parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park. This one is interesting because though Farron was shot and murdered and died from this interaction, the boyfriend Miguel did not. He survived and was taken to the Kaiser Foundation Hospital to be taken care of and, brought to normal health. The third instance that's attributed to the Zodiac Killer is that of Brian Cavan Harnell, 20, at the time, and Cecilia Ann Shepard, who was 22. This one was a little bit different than the last ones. This occurred on September 27th, 1969, at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Not sure exactly. But this one was not a shooting-related death. This one was death by stabbing, which is definitely different when compared to the previous two, where a gun was used as the murder weapon. In this case as well, the boyfriend survived with 8 stab wounds. However, Shepard, the girlfriend, survived for a few days and passed away 2 days later on September 29th in 1969. The final murder that is attributed to the Zodiac killer, definitely attributed to him or her, I'm going to say him, is that of 29-year-old Paulie Stein, who was murdered on October 11th, 1969, in Presidio Heights in San Francisco. Those are the ones that are most attributed to the Zodiac killer. Now, this is my belief as to why this was not solved, and that's because at that time, forensic evidence was not prevalent. It was in a very, very infant stage when it came to forensic crime scenes and forensic evidence. That's what I was looking for. So there wasn't the whole DNA analysis part. And if I'm not mistaken, they didn't even call people serial killers indefinitely yet. I could be wrong, but the whole definition was not created yet, and the way to determine the possible attributes of the killer was not prevalent in law enforcement. So this person was able to get away with all of this, assuming that he did do all of these things, which is not confirmed, obviously, because we haven't found him. He was able to just get away with everything. Mostly because of several reasons. One, though they have a sketch of the guy, apparently, a possible sketch of the Zodiac killer, and in one of the instances, in one instance both people died. In several instances there's a description of the guy, which was the sketch, and then in one there's another description of him that includes his face being covered, so they couldn't really get the attributes of this person to confirm they're the same people. Now, why don't we go ahead and get into these murders, shall we? The first was the Lake Herman murder, which was of Faraday and Jensen, both of which were in their teen years. They were high school students at the time, and they were out on their first date at this point. They were both from Hogan High School, which was about 3 blocks away from Jensen's home, sadly. At the time, it's known that they visited a friend before going to a local restaurant for their dinner date, and then going out to Lake Herman, where they ended up being murdered. It's attributed to around 10:15 p.m. when this occurred, because Faraday is suspected, or it's suspected that Faraday parked his mother's car on a lover's lane that was well known, which is something that is also an MO of the Zodiac killer. Likes to go after lover's lane areas where couples would go out of sight of the general public so that they could either just make out or, do the mattress mambo. That's what lover's lane was usually used for in these times. I don't think this still happens, obviously because things are a lot more modernized, but at the time in the 60s, 70s, lovers' lanes were a big thing for dating. Um, the bodies were found at about 11 p.m., which was less than an hour from when they parked their car, or Faraday parked his car in the gravel turnout, and they were murdered. So whoever it was that murdered them was very quick when they did what they did. They were made very quick work of it. The sheriff department from Solano County was the one that investigated this, but obviously there were no leads actually developed because of how quickly it was, and two, both people died, so they couldn't get a description of the person, which is number one at this time, a big you're fucked. The investigation is fucked. It's postulated with forensic data that's used at the site, or just early forensic data. It's postulated that another car had pulled into the turnout prior to 11 p.m. and parked beside the couple. And that's when the killer came out of the second car, went to the Rambler, or to Faraday's vehicle, or it's possible he was ordering them out of the car, and then killed them outside of the car, got into his car, and left. So this is what's postulated as being how the chain of events went. Hi, Murder Paula. How you doing? But long and short, it's postulated, or it's alleged, that the Zodiac killer showed up in his own vehicle, got the kids out of the other vehicle, shot Jensen 5 times in the back while she was running away from him, because her body was found 28 feet from the car, and Faraday was shot in the head. Got back in the car and took off. That's how it is believed the chain of events went. We don't know this for sure, obviously, but this is what is the most well-known, I guess, theory for the chain of events. Excuse me. The second murder was that of Farron and Miguel on July 4th, 1969, which happened, like I said before, Blue Rock Springs, which was a park that was 4 miles away from Lake Herman. So it was, both of the murder sites were 4 miles away from each other. And both were parked areas in lovers' lanes. So, this is what has been reported by Miguel when he was questioned about the chain of events that happened regarding the murder of his girlfriend at the time, or his date. It is said that Farron parked his car in the lover's lane, and a second car immediately drove next to them and immediately drove away, which is kind of sus. And then the car came back and parked behind them about 10 minutes later. The driver of the car exited the vehicle, went to the passenger side door, and flashed a 9mm Luger at the couple. He used a flashlight to keep Miguel and Farron from getting his description, meaning he blinded them with the flashlight, which is a tactic that is used by police officers, if you did not know. And then he shot them both whilst in the car. A total of 5 times. Both of the victims were hit. A couple passed through Mageo into Farron, and then the killer got back into his car when he heard that Mageo was not completely dead, and came back to shoot each of them 2 more times. So the Zodiac killer fired his weapon a total of 9 times, from what has been reported. On July 5th, the day after, at 12:40 a.m., a man phoned the Vallejo Police Department to report that he had committed the murder of the 2 that just happened the night prior. So he was saying, "Hey, I did it. I take complete responsibility for this. Haha, figure me out. Come catch me." He also took credit of Jensen Faraday's murder that was almost 7 months prior. This could have been a big lead if it was not for the fact that the call was traced back to a booth at a gas station at Springs Road and Tulumne, which was about 3/10 of a mile from Farron's home and just a few blocks away from the police department. So they could have caught this guy if they were smarter, but they didn't, which sucks ass, and not surprising for the time because of how things were handled. Unfortunately, as we know, Farron died at the hospital, but Mageo was able to survive even though he was shot in the face, neck, and chest. He described the Zodiac killer as being 26 to 30 years old, somewhere between 195 and 200 pounds, maybe even more, and was approximately 5'8", white male with short, light brown curly hair, which doesn't necessarily correspond with the picture we are so familiar with when it comes to the suspected Zodiac killer description. This is when things started getting interesting, and this is what made the Zodiac killer so prevalent and so popular, I guess, or well known in the public eye, is that the very first letter was sent to the San Francisco Times, the San Francisco Examiner, and, let me correct that. He sent the letter to 3 different places, which was the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner, on August 1st, 1969. All of them were nearly identical, and it's postulated that the person who wrote it was someone you would expect to be brooding and isolated. And in these letters, in this letter, the Zodiac killer took credit for the shootings that had occurred just prior to that year. And what was interesting was that this was a letter that was written in a 408 symbol cryptogram, or at least 1/3 of the letter was. And apparently it was claimed that this contained the identity of the killer. Interesting. The Zodiac killer demanded that this be printed in each of the paper's front page, or he would, quote unquote, cruise around all weekend, killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again until I end up with 12 people over the weekend. That was the reasoning behind publishing this cipher and the letter. Now, the Chronicle published the third of the cryptogram on page 4 of the next day, which was not what the Zodiac killer requested. And this was printed alongside a code that was quoted that said, "We're not satisfied that the letter was written by a murderer." and it was asked that the Zodiac killer send another letter with more facts to prove the identity of the Zodiac killer, to prove that he was actually involved. Though the 3 news outlets or 3 papers did not publish the letter on the front page of their papers, like was demanded, there's no evidence of the threatened murders actually happening that weekend. Eventually, all of the entirety of the letter was published, but at this point, they did not go and deal with this situation the way they were demanded of. Now, the cipher was decoded, and this is how it read. Quote, "I like killing people because it is so much more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill something. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience it has ever been. It's even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and that the people I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." And then there's just a weird word after that. So basically, the cipher comes out to say, I'm not telling you who I am. Fuck you. I get off on killing these people, and I do this because I believe I will be reborn in the afterlife with all the people I killed being my slaves. And I want to get as many slaves as I possibly can in the afterlife. That's kind of fucked up. That takes some balls to say stuff like that. Another letter was sent to the San Francisco Examiner, and this is the one that's really well known, because this is the quote-unquote, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking" letter. This is the first time that the Zodiac killer gave himself a name, or identified himself. Hi, Dustplanes, what's up, man? But this is where the Zodiac name came from, was this "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking" letter. It was a response. I don't think they did, Mr. Habs. I don't know of any fingerprints being found on the letters, but we'll see as we go through this whether or not that is the case. I don't know all the intricacies of the case, but I know a very good amount of the entirety of it, or the basic overview of it. The second letter was a response to the request for more details by Chief Stilts, and he provided more details that would prove he killed Faraday, Jensen, and Farron. In this letter, it is included details about the murders that was not made public. And the message to police when they cracked his code was, "They will have me." So there was another code in there. This code was cracked, or the one I read out, "The Most Dangerous Game," was cracked on August 8th, 1969 by Donald and Betty Hardin of Salinas, California. And it was a very misspelled message. Obviously, because I had to go back and reread some stuff. It's very janky. There's definitely some weird spelling in there, but you get the gist of what exactly is being said in it. And these provided some details about the murders that weren't public, obviously. Um, and it obviously gave what the killer's mindset and why he does what he does. There is no name in there, obviously, because he said fuck, gave him the middle finger and lied in the letter saying that the cipher would tell him who he is. Of course it didn't. The next murder happened in September 27th of 1969 when two Pacific Union College students, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, who were picnicking at Lake Berryessa on a Smile Island by a sand split to Twin Oak Ridge. It is reported by the surviving victim, which was the male again, Brian Hartnell. It could be that the guy didn't have English as his first language, or it's just a byproduct of the coding. It's probably a byproduct of the coding. That's what I think is the better reason as to why there's so many errors, spelling-wise, in that cipher text, or the deciphered text. Per the surviving victim, this is what had happened. A white man who was 5'11", weighing around 170 pounds, with combed, greasy brown hair, came to the vehicle wearing a black executioner-type hood, with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes, and a bib-like device on his chest, which is what we know of with that weird... I don't know how to explain it. It looks like an executioner picture that we see everywhere that was drawn. Trying to remember what religion believes that they have 7 virgins when they die waiting for them. I think that's Muslim. Or Islam. Yeah, it's Islam. Islamic religions believe that. But I'm not totally sure that that's what it's attributed to. I think it's just some sort of, like, maniacal belief or fantasy of the Zodiac killer. But, yeah, like Alex said, it applies only to martyrs. So this guy would have had to gotten killed in what he was doing to even be considered for this, for the Islamic version of this kind of afterlife. And that's, I don't think that's the case with this. What is also seen in that is the cross-like symbol that everybody attributes to the Zodiac killer. It is said that he approached the vehicle with a gun, a .45, which is what is alleged that he had. He claimed to be an escaped convict from a jail with a 2-word name in either Colorado or Montana. They haven't really figured it out, but it's inferred that it's the Deer Lodge in Montana, where he'd killed a guard and subsequently stole a car. And now he needed their car to get to Mexico, because the vehicle he had already was too hot. So the story the Zodiac killer gives is that he's an escaped convict. He stole a police officer's vehicle, or stole a vehicle once he was out. Well, he killed the guard and took his car. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep my notes intact, or keep with my notes. It's a little bit all over the place. He claimed that he killed a guard after getting out of jail, or escaping jail, and he was after them because he needed their vehicle to get to Mexico, to finally get away from the cops and make sure that he doesn't get put back in prison. I don't think that's actually true. I think it was just some weird story that the guy came up with to freak him out. Apparently, the Zodiac killer brought pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline and told Shepard to tie Hartnell up first before she was then tied up. The Zodiac killer was smart. He was smart enough to check that the man's bonds were tight when he noticed that the girl had put them on loosely. So he went and tightened them to make sure he couldn't Hartnell. That, yeah, in theory that would be good, Alex, but the problem is that the letters are trusted due to descriptions or details about the murders that were not publicly known being in those letters. And that usually is the sign that the actual person that committed them is the one giving the information. And it's difficult to backtrack letters because if there's no return address at the time, there's no way to find it. They could have just went over to a mailbox anywhere and put it in there without anybody really being able to identify him. So in theory that would be great, but there's a lot of problems with that because at this time there isn't the same kind of technology we have today, and good luck trying to figure out which mailbox this came from, because I doubt it came from somebody's actual address, and then try to figure out how that goes to the person that actually committed the murders or sent it. So while it is smart to think that that's a good idea or to question the letters, I believe, and most people who are aware of this case believe, that that is definitely the killer, again, because there were details in there that were not known to the public. And if you know serial killers that do this stuff, like Son of Sam, they give details in there that nobody else would know unless they were there. And that's usually what gets them caught. After he made sure to tighten Hartnell's binds, or bounds, whatever you want to call it, it was really changed in Hartnell's mind that this was not a robbery at all. There's no way this was a robbery, because the man the Zodiac killer pulled out a knife and stabbed them both repeatedly. Which is not... Obviously, this is why they died, and is not congruent with the same MO that was used prior to with the two other double murders. Or attempts at double murders. It's thought that the killer hiked about 500 yards up to the Knoxville Road and drew the cross symbol on Hartnell's car door with a black felt tip pen. So he made sure that was there. And it was also written beneath it, Vallejo 12/20/68, 7/4/69, September 27, 69, 6:30 by knife. So he basically gave the dates and locations of the murders that were happening previously, along with this one. So if you go by what is on that little note, this happened at 6:30. That's what is postulated if you want to go by that. Again, at 7:40 p.m. that day, the killer called Napa County Sheriff Office and from a payphone to give them hey, I killed him. I'm the one that's to blame. And it was stated by the killer at first that he wanted to report a murder, a double murder. And then he went on to say that he was the perpetrator of the crime. The phone was found, still off the hook, minutes later at a Napa car wash that was just a few blocks away from the sheriff's office. Again, 500 yards. 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 500 yar it was this guy is it's definitely the same guy with the same MO. It's what it's sounding like to me from all this information that's being gone over. And here is an answer to your question about the prints. No, there, as far as we know now, right now, we're going through this, there wasn't any fingerprints lifted off of the letters, but there was a palm print that was taken from the telephone that never matched anybody that they suspected of the crime. And at this time, they didn't have the whole FBI system where they have all the fingerprints in there, and you can just scan one fingerprint and see if it connects to anybody that's in the prison system or has had any it has any reason to have their fingerprints in that system. Because there are other reasons why you would have a fingerprint in the system. I had to give my fingerprints when I went to get security guard licenses. That's part of it. At this point, they didn't really find the bodies yet. This was still a report until a man and his son who were fishing not too long after or far away from that spot. Yeah, I would agree. He has a good amount of criminal knowledge or knowledge about how law enforcement works, and that's how he could kind of get away with all of this stuff. Smart. But again, it was a man and his son who were fishing nearby that heard them screaming for help. They got a hold of the Napa County sheriffs, and 2 sheriff's deputies were sent to that scene as the first responders. When they got there, Shepard was conscious, and she was able to give him a detailed description of the attacker. Hartnell wasn't, and both of them were taken to the Queen of the Valley Hospital in Napa via ambulance, obviously. Unfortunately, Shepard lapsed into a coma during going to the hospital and didn't come up. She didn't come back from that. Slipping in, it was a coma she never came out of. She was in a vegetative state at this point, and she ended up dying 2 days later. But fortunately, Hartnell was the one that was able to tell the press what had happened in more detail. The initial people that were assigned to this, or the initial detective assigned to this, which was Sheriff Detective Ken Narlow, was assigned to the case, but retired and came off of that team in 1987 when he retired. So there's a lot of different teams that had their hands on this, and information's gonna be missing, unfortunately, when that kind of thing happens. The final murder that is attributed to him happened 2 weeks later, on October 11th in 1969. It's postulated that a white male passenger entered a cab driven by Paul Stein at the intersection of Mason and Geary Streets in San Francisco, and requested to be taken to Washington and Maple Streets in Presidio Heights. Don't know why, but they drove 1 block past Maple and Cherry Street, and the Zodiac killer shot Stein once in the head with a 9mm, took his wallet and car keys, and left with a section of Stein's bloodstained shirt with him as a trophy. 3 teenagers observed the Zodiac killer, apparently, or it's believed that 3 teenagers saw the Zodiac killer cross the street at 9:55 p.m. And ended up calling the police saying that there was a crime in progress. So they saw it. They saw a man wiping the cab down before walking towards Presidio, which was 1 block north. And what's even worse is that the responding officers were 2 blocks away at the time. They were just right there when the Zodiac Killer did what he did and took off, disappeared into the night. Okay. It's believed that by another observation, there was a white man walking along the sidewalk east of Jackson Street, and was seen stepping onto a stairway leading up to the front yard of one of the houses there. It was only 5 or 10 seconds prior to them going to the scene of the crime, the final crime. The people who noticed it or saw the event estimated that the Zodiac Killer was a white male that's 35 to 45 years old, about 5'10" with a crew cut, which was similar to what was said by the teenagers that saw what was going on. But just like is normal when you have different witnesses, you're going to get different descriptions. While this guy that gave that description said he was 35 to 45 years old and 5'10", the kids said that the guy looked 25 to 30 years old, and it was 5'8" or 5'9". So it was close, but it's not the same description. What really screwed shit up was that the radio dispatcher, and I think this is kind of racist, but when the police had identified that a murder had happened and were told to respond to that murder, they said that it was a black guy. They said the suspect was black. And because of that, they had seen somebody that matched that description, but they couldn't pull him over because he was already gone. They had possibly driven past the Zodiac Killer, but because they were told to look for a black male, they didn't catch him. And there's no reason that we know of that was discrepancy was made by the police dispatcher. Obviously they didn't find anything, but again, this is the last murder we know of regarding the Zodiac Killer. Right? It's so, oh my god, so dumb. Like, why would you call somebody that's been said by 2 different sources that is white be shot out as black? He could have been. I'm going to be getting to who it's postulated as, or who the suspects were for the Zodiac Killer in a little bit. I'm going by chronological order here. Another letter, or let me back up track a little bit. Again, it's believed that the murder was a routine robbery that had escalated, but another letter showed up at the San Francisco Chronicle from the Zodiac that had that piece of bloody shirt taking credit for that killing. The sketch that is best known is from these 3 teenagers who worked with the sketch artist to put a picture of the killer out there, which we know today didn't really get anywhere. It got suspects, but none of the suspects were confirmed as the Zodiac Killer. It still remains unsolved today. And obviously, the guy sent the bloody piece of shirt, so there's no other way unless somebody else went to the vehicle and cut a piece of shirt, which was not witnessed by anybody that reported the crime, and took that piece away. So this had to have been the actual killer. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it with that particular item in it. They ended up having another witness prepare another composite sketch, but that I don't think that goes really anywhere. At this point, it's estimated that San Francisco police investigated about 2,500 suspects over the time that this has started. So they've gone through 2,500 suspects and haven't found the killer. That's freaky. Another letter was sent to the letter that I took of that was sent to the Chronicle with the piece of shirt included a threat about killing school children on a school bus, which is fucked up. It could have been cop or police adjacent, like the co-ed killer, or it could be self-taught, like the Bjork stalker. That's true. It could be. But if it's speculated that this person was incarcerated, which is what is been speculated about already, then they would be familiar with how this stuff works because of how they interacted with police prior. Again, not sure. There's a lot. Turn off my VPN. I'm an idiot. I didn't turn my VPN off beforehand. I'm an idiot. Sorry, guys. I fucked up. Hopefully I'm back and y'all can hear me again. Hopefully. I'm gonna kind of go to the page for this and make sure so that I can see if anybody's responded to this. It looks like people are still here. Okay, you can hear me now. Good. My bad. I need to remember to do that. Mental note. Filing that away. But like I was saying, the killer sent this third letter with the swatches of clothing from the victim, with a threat that they were going to kill school children on a bus, and this was the way that they went about saying it. Quote, they were going to just shoot the front tires and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. Interesting. Hopefully everybody that was here that pucked out will come back. If I have to restart, I'll do that. But hopefully it's working fine for you guys at this point. It's green on my end. But yeah, basically saying I'm gonna shoot the tires out, and as every kid comes out, I'm just gonna pick them off, which is really fucked up, in all honesty. Not long after that, about 6 days after that, on the 20th of October at around 2 p.m., the Zodiac called Oakland Police Department, demanding that one of the two prominent lawyers, F. Lee Bailey and Melvin Belly, appear on the AM San Francisco talk show on KGO TV that's hosted by Jim Dunbar. But so he's basically saying, and I want you to put somebody on this very well-watched show. And one of them wasn't available, but Belly did show up on the show. And Dunbar, the host, was appealing to viewers to keep the lines open. Meaning, don't call in, we're waiting for this guy to call us. And eventually that did turn out with somebody calling the show saying, I'm the killer. And several times said his name was Sam. this also resulted in a scheduled meeting, or a talked about meeting between Melvin Belly and the killer in Daly City, but the killer never showed up, obviously. If that was the case, they would have, figured out exactly who it was, they would have got him. Another correspondence from the Zodiac killer came back to went back out on November 8th, 1969, which was a card with another cryptogram with 340 characters. This was dubbed the Z340 letter that was unsolved. Which is the one that we did that was deciphered. I'm not gonna go over that now because we're gonna be talking about that with an actual article on this. But this cipher remained unsolved for 51 years. Is solved now, but that took that long for somebody to decipher this second code. There was a 7-page letter that was sent the next day that said 2 policemen stopped and actually spoke to him 3 minutes after he shot Stein. An excerpt for the letter were put in the San Francisco Chronicle 3 days later, including that claim. And the same day, Officer David Folk, which is one of the officers that is speculated of driving by the actual Zodiac killer, this memo explained exactly what happened around the night of that murder. And exactly 1 year after the murder of Faraday and Jensen, another letter was mailed to Belly, which had another swath of Stein's shirt. Oh yeah, he craved so much attention. He was one of those attention whores, which if you look at how serial killers work, most of the ones that are looking for this kind of attention are of high IQ and just absolutely want some sort of attention. They need to be recognized for what they've done, even if it could cost them everything. It could cost them their freedom because they could be found out this way. Hey, what's up, Ed? Glad you could make it. We still got a lot to go over, so there's still plenty to listen to. But another letter with a swath from the Stein murder went to the lawyer that almost met up with the Zodiac killer in Daly City. Now, here is some of the speculation of who the Zodiac killer was. And there's a lot of it. There's a lot. Yeah, it worked. It definitely worked. They got a lot of attention. So, here is what is speculated. The first guy that is speculated by authors at this point, various authors that were very interested in this case. I mean, who wouldn't be? It's holy shit. The initial suspect, or one of them, was Roberto Domingos, 18, or speculated at the time of the killings. Oh, these are possible works. Okay, these aren't the suspects. These are possible other murders. Ted Cruz, that would be interesting. But these are other crimes that were similar, but were not confirmed as Zodiac killer crimes. One of them is 18-year-old Robert Domingos and 17-year-old Linda Edwards that were shot and killed on the beach near Gaviota on June 4th, 1963. There are some similarities to the attack that This is speculated to be one of them because it's very similar to the Lake Berryessa murders 6 years later. Another one is of Sherry Jo Bates, who was 18 at the time. She was stabbed to death and nearly decapitated on October 30th, 1966 at Riverside College in Riverside. The possible connection to the Zodiac is because 4 years after her murder, the San Francisco Chronicle reporter Paul Avery received a tip regarding similarities between the killings and the circumstances around Bates' death. The third of the four is speculated is of Donna Last, who was 25 at the time, who was last seen on September 6th, 1970 in State Line, Nevada. This is speculated because the postcard came with an advertisement from Forest Pines Condominiums, which is near Lake Tahoe, and pasted on the back was received to the Chronicle on March 12th, 1971. So this is thought to be that, because this is thought to be attached to the Zodiac Killer because of a postcard that was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. Unfortunately, there's no evidence to connect Lass's disappearance and the Zodiac Killer other than that. The last one of the four is that of Kathleen Johns, who was 22 at the time. She was abducted on March 22nd, 1970 on Highway 132 in Modesto. She apparently escaped the car, and she escaped the car from a man who drove her and her infant daughter around the area between Stockton and Patterson for about an hour and a half. I'm not necessarily sure, or it doesn't say necessarily on that general statement why exactly that's speculated as being connected, but there is some further description that's been given in my notes regarding the report from Kathleen Johns. She apparently was driving to San Bernardino, from San Bernardino to Petaluma to visit her mother. She's 7 months pregnant at the time and had a 10-month-old daughter with her. And she was heading west on Highway 132 near Modesto when a car behind her began honking its horn at her and flashing its lights. She pulled off the side of the road and stopped, and the man in the car came out, parked behind her, came over to the car and said he'd seen her right rear wheel was wobbling and offered to tighten the lug nuts on the wheel. He went and did that, and then he drove off. But when she went to re-enter the highway, the wheel almost came completely off her car. So he didn't actually tighten anything. He loosened that tire. The man came back and offered to drive her to the nearest gas station for help, so they got into his car, which is a bad idea. They ended up going on a ride with him past several passing several service stations, and no sign of stopping. And about 90 minutes in of driving back and forth on the back roads near the city of Tracy, they stopped. Or he wasn't stopping. And when she asked about why they weren't stopping, he would change the subject. So he wouldn't tell her why they were driving about and not stopping anywhere. The driver inevitably stopped at an intersection, and Johns jumped out with her daughter and hid in a field away from the driver. Though that driver tried to find her using a flashlight and telling her he wouldn't hurt her, the guy gave up because he wasn't able to find her and just took off. She ended up hitching a ride to the police station in Patterson where she reported the crime. She noticed this is why this is connected. She noticed the composite sketch from the Paul Stein's time murder, and said that that was the man that abducted her. So that's how that is connected. So they basically kept her somewhere safe while they went to go get her car. And when their car was found, it had been gutted and torched. So they couldn't get any evidence out of that, which is really bad. There are some accounts from her that he threatened to kill her and her daughter while driving around, but the police report says that is not the case. It's speculated that the abductor left his car and searched for her with a flashlight, but in one report, it said that she didn't leave the vehicle, or he didn't leave the vehicle. So there's a lot of conflicting information about this particular story, which is really, really weird. It's believed that the Zodiac kept communicating with authorities the remainder of 1970 through letters and greeting cards to the press. One of them was postmarked on April 20th in 1970 and wrote, quote unquote, "My name is blank," followed with a 13-character cipher. Another one. It also went on to state that he was not responsible for the recent bombing at the police station in San Francisco that happened on February 18th in 1970, but added, quote, "There is more glory to killing a cop than sick because a cop can shoot back." The letter also included a diagram of the bomb that the Zodiac killer claimed he would use to blast a school bus. Again, the school bus thing is brought up. At the bottom of the diagram, it showed that weird cross symbol and said that the cross symbol equals 10 and SFPD equals 0. So there's some kind of code that he gave them. Another communication was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle via a greeting card postmarked April 28th, 1970. And on the card it was written, quote unquote, quote, yeah, they did. I'm going to go over that later at the end, though, because I'm going in chronological order, Ed. The card said, quote, "I hope you enjoy yourselves when I have my blast," which had the Zodiac symbol on it. And on the back of the card, again, there was a bomb threat unless the newspaper published the full details that he wrote. He also wanted to start seeing people wearing, quote, "some nice Zodiac buttons." So he basically wanted his shit on the front of the papers again. And he wanted buttons made out of the symbol. Which is very, very conceited and very ballsy. Another letter came, again, to the Chronicle, postmarked June 26, 1970, saying he was upset he did not see people wearing Zodiac buttons. And he said, quote, "I shot a man sitting in a parked car with a .38, quote unquote. Which is kind of referring to a murder of a Sergeant Richard Raditic, which was a week earlier, while the sergeant was writing a parking ticket in his squad car. It's postulated that the Zodiac pulled up on him and shot him in the head with a .38 caliber pistol, resulting in his death. SFPD denies that there was involvement of the Zodiac killer, but that murder still is unsolved. Nobody knows who killed that cop. Along with that letter, there was a Phillips 66 road map of the San Francisco Bay Area. And on that, the image of Mount Diablo or on the image of Mount Diablo, the Zodiac had drawn a cross circle similar to those that had been indicated in the previous correspondence. So he basically put his little cross on a specific spot on that map, or picture of a map. At the top of the circle, he placed a 0, a 3, a 6, and a 9. There were some instructions that came with that stated the 0 was, quote, to be set to mag.n. It also included a 32-letter cipher that the killer claimed would, along with the code, lead to the location of a bomb he'd buried set to go off in the fall. So this guy likes to send bomb threats. I don't know why. That makes no fucking sense, but bomb threats galore, apparently. This is still not decoded. And the bomb was never found. The killer signed the note with the typical cross equals 12, FPD equals 0. So what it looks like is this is, if I'm postulating this correctly, this is basically the meme of me 1, you 0. I won against you once, and now it's at 12. So I'm guessing that there are 12 murders at this point when this note came to the Chronicle. Another letter came to the Chronicle on July 24th, 1970, where the Zodiac took credit for Kathleen John's abduction 4 months after the incident. Sounds like maybe he wanted to watch them scramble and get his 10 more seconds of fame. Oh yeah, obviously. That's what they get off on. They want to get a reaction out of you. They want you to try and find them and not find them. There was also another letter on, kind of crazy, California kind of got the Zodiac kills 60s and 70s, and Kemper in the early 70s. Yeah, California's got a lot of the really famous ones, which is really sucky and scary, but nowadays it's a lot easier to catch these people, so I'm not too worried if more things happen. Obviously, I don't want it to happen, but if it does and another serial killer comes out, it's very unlikely that they're going to get away with it completely 100% with all the technology that we have. Another letter showed up to the Chronicle 2 days later, on July 26, 1970, and the Zodiac paraphrased a song from the Mikado that added his own lyrics, making a, quote, little list, unquote, of the ways he planned to torture slaves in paradise. Being a dick, obviously. Callie deserves more serial killers. Shut up, Ed. Shut up. And again, this was signed with the Zodiac symbol equals 13 now, SFPD equals 0. So another kill, you would say another kill or crime is added to the list. Then I'm moving at a Callie, laughing, but yeah. Probably a good idea, but anywhere you go, there's probably going to be serial killers. Some places more less likely than others, but you'll never totally get away with it. At the very bottom of the letter, after the whole 13 me, you 0, there was another note that said, P.S. The Mount Diablo code concerns radians, plus numbers, inches along the radians. I'm guessing that's something to do with location or finding the longitude, latitude. I don't fucking know. I know I'm not moving there, that's for sure. Yeah, it's probably a good idea, because Callie sucks. In 1981, that radians examination came from the Zodiac came to be, it was found to be the discovery that the radian angle, when placed over the map of the Zodiac's instructions, pointed to the locations of 2 of the Zodiac attacks. And that was found by researcher Gareth Penn. That's interesting. I don't know what radian means, but apparently if when deciphered, it went to 2 different places. where attacks happened. On October 7th in 1970, the Chronicle received a 3x5-inch card signed by the Zodiac with that little Zodiac symbol. And it was drawn in blood this time. This one was formed from pasting words and letters from an edition of the Chronicle, with 13 holes punched across the card, which is, I'm assuming, with the last letter saying me 13, you 0. That's another reference to that. Do killers usually embellish the numbers of people they kill? Yes and no. There are some killers that will say that they are attributed to other things, but they're either disproven or there's no evidence that confirms or denies that. Confirms or excludes that. So, depends on the serial killer. But there are some that have done that. And I'm gonna say this was probably another case of that. But I don't know for sure. Again, nobody knows for sure. And after that last card was received, it's definitely speculated that it's really highly probable that it came from the Zodiac. Another letter was sent out on October 27th, 1970, to reporter Paul Avery, who worked with the Chronicle and been covering the case, which was a Halloween card with a letter Z and the Zodiac symbol on it. On the card was the note, "Peekaboo, you're doomed," which is something they definitely took seriously and put on the front page of the Chronicle. And after receiving that letter, there was another anonymous letter that kind of said, that led him to think that the murder of Sherry Jo Bates was connected to the Zodiac 4 years earlier. Those findings were put in the Chronicle on November 16th, 1970. Again, there's no it isn't legitimately connected that the Zodiac was involved with the that murder, the Sherry Jo Bates murder. But, it's possible because of this particular card. So, apparently this murder took place on the 30th of 1966, while she just finished being in the campus library until 9 p.m. Neighbors heard a scream around 10:30 p.m., and she was found dead the next morning, just a short distance by the library, between two abandoned houses slated to be demolished for campus renovations. What was found were several wires in her Volkswagen distributor cap that were pulled out. Or the wires were pulled out of her Volkswagen distributor cap. And she was apparently killed by brutal beating and stabbing. They found a man's Timex watch on top with a torn wristband nearby that was with it stopped at 12:24. I'm assuming 12:24 a.m. They think that the attack occurred earlier than that, but they don't know. A month later, on the 29th of November, nearly identical typewritten letters were mailed to the Riverside Police and Riverside Press Enterprise, titled the Confession. The author of the letter said that he was responsible for the Bates murder and gave details of the crime that weren't released to the public again, which is very similar to what the Zodiac did. And warned that Bates is not the first and she will not be the last. In December 1966, a poem was discovered carved in the bottom side of a desktop in the Riverside City College Library that was titled "Sick of Living, Unwilling to Die." And the way that the poem was written and the language used resembled that of the Zodiac letters. it was signed with the soon-to-be initials RH, and during the investigation, it was speculated by a documents examiner that this was the Zodiac killer's writing. In April 30th of 1967, Bates' father Joseph and the Press Enterprise and Riverside Police received nearly identical letters in handwritten scrawl, with the Press Enterprise and Police ones reading, "Bates had to die, there will be more," and a small scribble at the bottom that resembled a Z. However, the father's copy read, "She had to die, there will be more," and didn't have the signature, which is really interesting. March 13th of 1971, another letter was mailed to the Los Angeles Times, crediting the police for discovering quote Riverside activity, but there are only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there. So it's basically saying, you found a couple, but I've killed more, and you guys haven't found it. Which is really scary to think that there's a lot more murders that are attributed to the Zodiac killer. And the connection apparently is still, well, very uncertain, but it's maintained by the police department that it's not the Zodiac killer that committed that. And the Zodiac and somebody was sending to take, and they say that it might have been worked to claim credit falsely. Do you think the Zodiac killer might have been a tag team duo? I don't think so. Because every encounter that's described is one person and is a white male. That's basically what I believe, is that it's just a one person. And yes, Devin, it might be a copycat killer. Possible. But nobody really knows. This continued in Lake Tahoe on March 22nd, 1971, with a postcard to the Chronicle addressed to Paul Avery. And is believed to be from the Zodiac, claiming responsibility of the disappearance of Donna Lass on September 6, 1970. This letter was made from a collage of advertisements and magazine lettering, featuring a scene from an advertisement for Forest Pine condominiums, and the text Sierra Club and sought victim 12. Also said peek through the pines, past Lake Tahoe areas, and around in the snow, which seems to be like a bunch of clues as to when this happened, where this happened, and where the body could be. Creepy. The symbol was also on there, in the place of the usual return address and at the lower right section of the front face of the postcard. So there's apparently the signature there. Another letter was sent to the another story appeared in the Vallejo Times-Herald on November 13th, 1972, basically postulating that the 1963 murders of a couple in northern Santa Barbara County might have been the work of a serial killer, which was the murder of Domingos and his fiancée Linda Edwards, that were shot and killed on a beach in Lompoc. This was basically skip school for senior ditch day, which is really sad. It's believed that the assailant attempted to bind the victims, but they freed themselves and attempted to flee, which resulted in the killer shooting them repeatedly in the back and chest with a .22 caliber weapon. The bodies were placed in a small stack and then attempted to be burned. The last letter that came out was after the Pines card. And it was 3 years after that the Chronicles received another letter. So basically, the Zodiac sent that Pines card, went quiet for 3 years, and then finally sent another letter to the Chronicle on January 29th in 1974, saying that The Exorcist was the, quote, the best satirical comedy that I've ever seen. That's fucked up. It also included a snippet of a verse from the Mikado and an unusual symbol at the bottom that has remained unexplained by researchers. The letter was concluded with the new score, me 37, SFPD 0. So it's postulated that 37 people have died because of the Zodiac Killer, or due to the Zodiac Killer. And we are only aware of 5 that are actually, like, connected to him. There were a lot of other letters that are kind of thought to be from the Zodiac Killer, but aren't necessarily they aren't authenticated to be him. They aren't confirmed to be him. There was one letter that was postmarked February 14th, 1974, that was sent to the Chronicle informing the editors the initials for Symbionese Liberation Army, spelled out an old Norse word meaning kill. But the handwriting didn't seem was not similar enough to the Zodiac's to be authenticated. Another came on May 8th, 1974, and referred to the movie Badlands as murder glorification, and asked the papers to cut its advertisements for it. It was signed only a citizen, but with how it was, the handwriting, tone, and surface irony were similar to the Zodiac's communications. Another letter came to the Chronicle and was postmarked for July 8th, 1974, complaining of their publishing the writings of the anti-feminist columnist Marco Spinelli. And it was signed the Red Phantom, Red with Rage. It's debated that that doesn't sound anything like, to me, like the Zodiac Killer from what we already talked about and what we know. Another letter dated April 24th, 1978 was sent to the Chronicle and initially was believed to be authentic, but only turned out to be a hoax 3 months later after experts examined the letter. It was thought that, or it's speculated that Dave Toshi, a homicide detective for San Francisco PD, who worked since the Stein murder on the Zodiac case, forged it because it was believed the letter to be similar to fan mail, and it's believed that it's authored by him, which he admitted to writing fan mail. He denied that the letter was from him, and he was cleared of writing the hoax letter. The last one occurred on March 3rd, 2007, when an American Greetings Christmas card was sent to the Chronicle, postmarked 1990 in Eureka. It was rediscovered in photo files by editorial assistant Daniel King. So basically this last one was buried since 1990. So it was buried for 17 years before it was actually found and looked over. In the envelope with the card was a copy of 2 U.S. postal keys on a magnet keychain. And the writing on the envelope does resemble the Zodiac's print, but is considered inauthentic due to forensic document examination. And that's debated because obviously people do believe that that's from the Zodiac killer. There's no return address on the envelope, and the symbol wasn't there. Cards unmarked, and you'd think that the Zodiac killer would put his stamp all over that shit. Unfortunately, in 2004, the San Francisco Police Department marked this case as inactive and said that the caseload pressure and resource demands effectively closed the case. They couldn't keep up with it. However, that was reopened again before March 2007. The case is still open in Napa County and the city of Riverside. In May 2018, the Viejo Police Department announced their intention to collect the Zodiac killer's DNA from the back of the stamps during the correspondence. The analysis was expected to check the DNA against GEDmatch at a private laboratory, and it's hoped that this could catch the Zodiac killer, like they caught the Golden State killer, Joseph James D'Angelo. And even though the Viejo Police Department said that it would only take several weeks, the results have never been reported, as far as I'm aware. So really, that's everything up until 2018. However, there's more that goes along with that. Before I even go to that, I'm going to talk about who is speculated as being the Zodiac killer. The main suspect of this murder is Arthur Lee Allen. And that a lot of that evidence comes from a book called Zodiac that was written by Robert Graysmith. And this basically put him on the forefront of being the Zodiac killer. Allen was interviewed by the police in the early days of the Zodiac investigations and had several warrants over a 20-year period. So he had a lot of interaction with the police. In 2007, it was noted several police detectives describing Allen as the most likely suspect. But in 2010, it's stated that the evidence against Allen ultimately turned out to be negative. So they initially thought it was this guy, but it ended up being not that guy. Finally, a video about Ted Cruz. You're welcome, Conf. And here is a lot of the evidence as to why he was believed to be the murderer. On October 6, 1969, he was interviewed by a detective at Vallejo Police Department and was reported in the vicinity of the Lake Berryessa attack on September 27th, 1969. He said that he was scuba diving at Salt Point on the day of the attacks. And that was he wasn't obviously brought in for that. He wasn't arrested for that. He was also brought in again in 1971 when a friend of his reported to the Manhattan Beach police that Allen had spoken of his desire to kill people, used the name Zodiac, and had a flashlight and firearm for visibility at night. And apparently this conversation occurred somewhere before January 1st, 1969. After hours to see if he did or not. Yeah, totally. Authorities from the Vallejo Police Department wrote Allen had received another an honorable discharge from the military, or the U.S. Navy in 1958, was fired from his job as an elementary school teacher in 1968 after allegations of sexual misconduct with students. And even so, with that, he was seen as being, a good guy when people he knew, but also described as fixated on young children and angry at women. He never had a girlfriend or wife, apparently. In September 1972, the San Francisco police obtained a search warrant for Allen's residence. In 1974, he was arrested for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old boy, which he pled guilty to and got 2 years imprisonment. Another search was served in 1991, and 2 days after his death in 1992, another warrant was served, and property was seized from Allen's residence. So the guy's already dead. There's more. A lot of the evidence they found is very circumstantial. There isn't any concrete evidence that he is the Zodiac killer. For example, the letter sent to the Riverside Police Department for Bates's murder was typed with a certain typewriter that was very specific, which was a Royal typewriter with an elite type. And this is the very same typewriter that was found, or same kind of typewriter that was used by him in February 1991 when they searched his residence. He apparently owned and wore a Zodiac brand wristwatch. He lived in Vallejo and worked minutes away from where the victims were found, or where they lived. It's crazy the Zodiac never got caught for a long time. My aunt was big into murder mysteries, and this one always intrigued me. Oh yeah. That and the Black Dahlia case. That's a good one too. I think 3 of the ones that are really unsolved that I really am into is the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, and Black Dahlia. Those are the 3 that I'm really interested in. But there's no way any of those are gonna get solved. I don't think they ever will be solved. And there's a lot of people that agree. In 2002, San Francisco PD got a partial DNA profile from the stamps on the Zodiac letters and compared it against the DNA of Allen. And the DNA compared evidence was compared to the friend that reported he'd said he was the Zodiac killer. And neither of the tests indicated a match. So that really, I think, takes him out of the equation. If even a partial DNA comparison came out as a negative, that's not your guy. And there's just a lot of circumstantial evidence for that particular guy, but he's the main suspect. There are other people that are suspected of being the Zodiac killer, and this is who they are. First is Ross Sullivan, who was considered a possible person of interest due to a connection between the Zodiac killer and the Bates murder in Riverside. This connection is that Sullivan was the library assistant at the same college that Bates went to, and it was suspected that by coworkers who said he had gone missing for several days after the murder. He also resembled sketches of the Zodiac, and wore military-style boots with footprints like those that were found at the Lake Berryessa crime scene. What else really makes him a suspect is that he's been hospitalized multiple times for bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. I don't think the Zodiac killer was schizophrenic or bipolar. So he's not. I think he's on the list, but he's not at the top of the list at all. The next one is Lawrence Kane, because Kathleen Johns, who we're suspecting was abducted by the Zodiac killer, picked out this guy's photo in a photo lineup. And Officer Folk, who observed the Zodiac killer following the murder of Stein, said that Kane closely resembled the man that they had encountered. Kane worked at the same Nevada hotel as the possible Zodiac victim Donna Lass, and he was diagnosed with impulse control disorder with brain injuries after suffering brain injuries in a 1962 accident. He was also arrested for voyeurism and prowling. That's another suspect. Richard Marshall was also accused of being the Zodiac killer due to police informants that claimed he privately hinted at being a murderer. He lived in Riverside in 1966 and San Francisco in 1969, which were close to the scenes of the Bates and Stein murders. He was a silent film enthusiast and projectionist, and screened Segundo de Camon's The Red Phantom, and used a name used by the author of possible 1974 Zodiac letter. One of the detectives said Marshall makes good reading, but is not a very good suspect in my estimation. So that's how he's ruled out. Here comes one name you guys should know. Another person that's suspected of this is Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Because Kaczynski worked in Northern California around the time of the murders. He had a very deep interest in cryptography and threatened the press to publishing his communications, just like the Zodiac killer did. And unfortunately, he was ruled out by both the FBI and SFPD because of fingerprint and handprint analysis, along with his absence from California around certain dates of known Zodiac activity. Another is Bruce Davis, who is a member of the Charles Manson family, because he was reported by the California Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation that all members of the Manson family have been investigated and eliminated as Zodiac suspects. So all of them were fucking ruled out. Another is Jack Terrence, which came out as a possible subject in 2007 when his stepson, Dennis Kaufman, said to the FBI that his dad had items that were very similar to the ones that the Zodiac had or were described as having, like the hood. A DNA analysis conducted by the FBI on the items was inconclusive in 2010. Another is a former lawyer, Robert Tarboux, who was disbarred from the California court for failure to pay clients, apparently. Said that in the early 1970s, a merchant mariner walked into his office and confessed to him that he was a Zodiac killer. There isn't a name given to this, but this is what the lawyer says about that encounter. He says that the person was seemingly lucid, and he couldn't reveal the name due to confidentiality. Described his crimes, but briefly but persuasively enough to convince Tarboux. The man said he was trying to stop himself from his opportunistic murder spree, but didn't show up again. The lawyer ended up taking a full page on the Vallejo Times-Herald, claiming he would clear Allen's name, but his only reason for revealing which is the only reason he revealed it after 30 years, Um, the person, or Robert Graysmith, who wrote a lot of the books about the Zodiac, thinks that the story is entirely plausible. So it's possible that this lawyer could have run into the Zodiac killer. Another person that is speculated of being involved is newspaper editor Richard Gaikowski, who was said during the murders to work for Good Times, which was a counterculture newspaper in San Francisco. His appearance resembled the composite sketch, and a police dispatcher that was contacted by the Zodiac shortly after the Blue Rock Springs attack identified and recording of Galowski's voice as being the same. So he's suspected of being the killer because their voice was identified as being the same. I don't know how that fucking works. It's also believed that George Hodel, who is also thought to be the Black Dahlia killer, was possibly the Zodiac. Which is really, really funny and really, really creepy. Another person was suspected of being the killer in 2010 on America's Most Wanted, because it closely resembled the composite. He closely resembled the composite sketch. Yeah, that's interesting. And the photo was taken in San Francisco in the middle of 1966 and 1967. Edward Edwards, another convicted serial killer, was linked to the Zodiac and several other unsolved cases through cold case detective John A. Cameron, which everybody hates that. That one is immediately discounted by people who are very involved or have studied the Zodiac case. Another person that they thought goes under the pseudonym of George Russell Tucker. He discovered Tucker outlined an alleged cover-up for why he was not pursued, but Tucker died in 2012, and is not considered something to be suspected by the police, or someone to be suspected by the police. Louis Joseph Myers was reported to be possible serial killer in February 2014, with several connections being made, like the first being that he attended the same high school as Faraday and Jensen, and allegedly worked in the same restaurant where Farron as victim Farron. So he knew. So he knew them through school, and the first two victims from school, and he knew another victim through working at the same restaurant as them. I'm surprised they haven't taken their sketches and put it on a sculpture and aged it via comp tech. Yeah, that would be interesting to see. I don't know if that'll help, but I mean, they could definitely do that. I guess you could say they're surprised that they didn't do that. Another reason why Myers is suspected is during the 1971 and 1973 period, when there were no Zodiac letters received, he was overseas with the military. It's also said that he confessed he targeted couples because he had a bad breakup with a girlfriend. And this is really... This is still... Everyone's skeptical of this one as well. Second to the last is Robert Ivan Nichols, who's a former thief that committed suicide in Eastlake, Ohio in July 2002. After his death, investigators couldn't find his family, but discovered he'd stole the identity of an 8-year-old boy who was in a car accident in Texas in 1945. Weird. the lengths, he's suspected to be violent because of the lengths he went to hide his identity. Some people think that he might be the Zodiac because he resembled the police sketches of the Zodiac and lived in California where the Zodiac operated. The final suspect, or possible suspect, is Earl Van Best Jr., who was suspected of being the killer through the reports of his son, Gary Stewart. And this one got turned into a book called The Most Dangerous Animal of All, as well as an adaptation for FX as a documentary series. And we're going to go over that. It's also believed that the Zodiac thing was a hoax. I don't believe that. I'm not going to even go into that because I don't really believe it. It's apparently because people don't think that any of the murders are connected. The modus operandi is generally different in some of them. It just doesn't, to some people, it doesn't seem like they are all connected. It could be true, it could be not, but I don't give this really much credence at all. Now, I'm going to pull up the article for the FX series so that we can look at that together, yes? This is from New York Post. FX series explores a man's claim that his father was a Zodiac killer. It's probably one of the more interesting things. It's natural for an adopted person to be curious about their birth parents, but for Gary Stewart, his search might have led him to one of the country's most infamous serial killers. 4-part docu-series, The Most Dangerous Animal of All, is based on the book that he wrote in 2014, which follows him as he searches for his birth parents, uncovering information that leads him to believe that his father was the notorious Zodiac killer, the still unknown murderer who operated in Northern California in the 1960s and 70s, taunting the Bay Area press with the letter of his deeds. He's quoted as saying, they wanted the sketch of the Zodiac Killer. The wanted sketch of the Zodiac Killer just made my heart stop for an instant, because I had seen that face before and it looked just like my father. He says, although he wanted to meet his birth parents for his entire life, he didn't meet his mother until 2002. Quote, I thought maybe me searching would hurt somebody's feelings. Fortunately, I didn't have to. My biological mother came looking for me, and we connected for the first time in 2002. Interesting. Coincidentally, Judy's second husband was a homicide inspector in the San Francisco Police Department and had worked the Zodiac case. That's interesting circumstances. He was deceased when my mother found me, but when I told her I wanted to find my father, she went to her husband's old work colleagues and their friends in San Francisco Police Department and asked them. It took several months to find my father's files, but the information they presented me was that there was information in that file that they were not willing to share with me, and it's pretty bad stuff. Bad stuff, quote unquote. Doesn't always mean murder, but Stewart reveals in the first episode that his father was a troubled 27-year-old who began his relationship in 1961 with Judy, who was 13 at the time. And he was incarcerated for that. So, Daddy Dearest is a pedo. Great. That's a great start. Fucking hell. Quote, for the longest time, my motivation was, that's the face of the dad, by the way. The, Zodiac's sketch overlaid. Interesting. Um, oops. I'll have to cut that out. Um, for the longest time, my motivation was because I wanted to meet him and hear his side of the story. And I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to know that I was a successful businessman and a graduate of Louisiana State University, an electrical engineer, and that he had a grandson. And if he had his side of the story, I wanted to extend forgiveness to him for what he had done to me. I wanted to tell him, look, it's okay. Maybe the greatest thing you did for me was to give me away. This all kind of kickstarted for him, I guess, in 2004 when he was watching a cold case show, and the Zodiac Killer was hosted by Bill Curtis. He saw the Wanted sketch, and it made him think he recognized his dad. His sketch, with the crimes combined, created timeline and location all lined up with the Zodiac case. Quote, do we really know the genetic effect of being related to a serial killer? How does that play in the future generations? I wanted to take the dysfunctional cycle of my father's life and use the new beginnings from Stewart household to give my son and grandchild an opportunity to walk away from this and never have to be concerned with what kind of blood they have. And this gave him some kind of closure. Okay, I'm not going to read that last part because, again, kind of boring. But here is a little snippet of the docuseries. I think I've seen this before. I may have to go back and watch it, but here it is.
It wasn't until I started doing my own research that I...
That looks like the fucking Zodiac Killer. I don't, dude. Where's the picture of the guy? And I'll... There's the Zodiac Killer sketch. There's the dad. Sketch. Dad. Sketch. Dad. Looks oddly similar, don't it?
Actually found out the whole truth.
I knew from my mother's friends in this.
I did find other interviews from this guy, and he was extremely fucking boring, so I did not want to bring those on, because that's just not worth talking about or showing if it's gonna make you guys fall asleep.
San Francisco Police Department, that my father had a record that the SFPD said they would not share with me because what was in that file was so heinous it would destroy.
So this is what they were talking about when they brought up the file that they weren't gonna give him because it was so fucked up that they thought it was gonna upset him.
Destroy me.
Gary Stewart's father abandoned him when he was just a baby, 4 weeks after he was born.
Not only
4 weeks after he was born. Okay. I think I know some of the information on this, and when I heard it, it was really, really eerily similar.
had he abandoned me, he was abusive to me. He locked me in a footlocker because he got tired of hearing it cry.
Gary was...
He put him in a footlocker because he couldn't stand hearing it cry. Wow. Wow.
Eventually adopted and didn't know much about his biological father. Then one day it clicked while he was watching TV.
I see.
I can completely understand seeing that sketch on there and going, holy shit, maybe my dad's a Zodiac Killer. What the fuck?
A wanted sketch of the Zodiac Killer. And it looked just like the only photo I had of my father, which was his mugshot.
The man in the photo?
That's his dad's mugshot. That looks fucking similar. That looks scarily similar.
Earl Van Best Jr. He'd been arrested for the statutory rape of Gary's biological mother. Gary started investigating Earl's life and now believes that his dad was the Zodiac Killer.
I could think at first that could happen just from the sketch alone, but there's more to it when he went through the investigation that he found.
That's when I began to connect the dots that maybe this is what's so heinous, that he got away with it and they never caught him.
The Zodiac killer murdered at least 5 people in California in the 60s. He was never caught.
2 more communications have been received.
Yep, never caught. I think that's a good connection to make. Maybe that's why they won't show me, because they know he's the killer, but they can't prove it. I don't know. Maybe.
From the person who calls himself the Zodiac Killer.
But the killer did send handwritten letters to several local newspapers. The letters also contained a code, which Gary says he was able to crack.
There's the code. That's a weird fucking code.
The Zodiac said, if you crack this cipher, you will have my identity. I immediately saw my father's.
Okay, this kind of gets into the weird territory, I think. But I guess we'll listen to what he has to say and how he connected it.
Name.
And there are many more coincidences revealed in the documentary.
What are the odds that...
Wait, go back. So, he thinks that that's his dad.
Name.
Because of, some crossword puzzle
And there
crap
are many
in
more
the
coincidences
cipher.
revealed in the documentary.
What are the odds that Gary Stewart thinks his father was the Zodiac killer and that...
That's the other picture that everybody knows of for the Zodiac killer is that. That's the executioner look that was brought up a couple of times, or brought up in one of the cases.
And they've got the same handwriting, the same scar, and they're in the same places.
Believing the Zodiac killer was his...
Same, they look the same, in the same places at the same time, have similar handwriting, similar fingerprints, apparently. That's kind of creepy to me.
His father has been incredibly painful for Gary, but he has been able to move on with his life. Gary even visited the grave with his own son.
He said something to me then.
I think that's pretty much all we need to see on this. So, let's go to the fun stuff that came out recently. Now, just earlier this month, the cipher that had been unable to crack for 51 years was finally cracked. And we'll find out what it says. So, this article says a group of code breakers have managed to crack the infamous 340 cipher used by the Zodiac killer over 50 years ago. In the late 1960s, heading into the early 1970s, a serial killer by the pseudonym Zodiac murdered at least 5 people in California. During his spree, the killer sent taunting messages to the press, written through a cipher where letters are substituted for different letters or numbers. Or in the case of the Zodiac killer, a series of symbols. The first letters were sent to 3 papers in the Bay Area, each containing a different part of the cipher. The papers printed the ciphers or cryptograms as the Zodiac threatened to kill again if his instructions weren't followed. The cipher, which was simpler than later efforts, was solved a week later on August 8th, 1969. We already read that one. Based on this, it's pretty incredible that he was able to come up with a cipher complicated enough to fool the FBI for years, but didn't put the effort in to give his spelling a quick double check. Or maybe ask a friend to look. Try not to read too much into the content, but you can have a quick check at it's my grammar, okay? Why would anybody do that? That's the dumbest fucking joke I've ever heard when it comes to this shit. You wouldn't have anybody read that. The letter contained no real clues, other than that the killer had some fairly odd delusions going on, needed to work on his spelling, and may have been inspired by The Most Dangerous Game, a movie about a man who was hunted by an aristocrat for kicks. After this first message, the killer's ciphers became more complicated. One, which contained 340 characters, has managed to elude decryption for 51 years. A team of code breakers decided to try and crack the code because they knew it to be a challenge. David Orenchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck, those are some weird fucking names, used software to help break the cipher. First, by finding the many possible reading directions could be used if the cipher was transpositional. By sheer luck, Oranchak found that the one solution for how the cipher could be transposed revealed fragments of the message, including "Hope you are," "Trying to catch me," and "or the gas chamber." This gave them clues that the message wasn't transcribed in one block as it was presented, but instead was broken into 3 smaller blocks of text made up of 9 lines, followed by 9 lines, followed by 2. By starting with the left-hand corner, then moving down 1 line and across 2 spaces to get the next letter, a key which could be translated into letters, and then words emerged. The letter B, for instance, was represented by square 7, C by simple 9, and A by a whole load of symbols unavailable on the keyboard. You can see these neatly shown in the video below. I'm not going to show the video, but I'm going to read this at least for you guys. This is what it was transposed as being. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me, where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise. So they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my life will be easy. My new life will be an easy one in paradise death." Weird. Yeah, complicated. And even the FBI tweeted this all out. This is what their statement regarding the cipher. "The FBI is aware that a cipher attributed to the Zodiac Killer was recently solved by private citizens. The Zodiac Killer case remains an ongoing investigation for the FBI San Francisco Division and our local law enforcement partners. The Zodiac Killer terrorized multiple communities across Northern California, and even though decades have gone by, we continue to seek justice for the victims of these brutal crimes. Due to the ongoing nature of the investigation and out of respect for the victims and their families, we will not be providing further comment at this time." That reads to me like, fuck, they figured it out before we did. That's what that reads to me. But that is as far as we are with the Zodiac case. It is still unsolved, but all the ciphers are, it looks like, translated. They've been deciphered. I have no idea where this is going to go. But my belief is that we are never going to find out. We will never know. It's the same thing with the Zodiac case. As time goes on, any evidence that you could have deteriorates. Cryptography is not my strong suit. It's not mine either. No, it's not my thing. But again, I don't believe they're going to be found. Any evidence that could have been found is deteriorated to the point where it's not going to help anything. You're not going to get any definitive proof of anything. Sad, but I think that's the truth. Now, my opinions are not facts. They're entertainment purposes. Therefore, entertainment purposes. But that is what I believe when it comes to the Zodiac case. To wrap it up, since we've been going for over 2 hours, the Zodiac Killer case is by far one of the most interesting when it comes to unsolved murders because of how it happened and all of the material that could have been used to find the person still not going anywhere. I don't think that he's going to be caught, and I think this is going to be a story for the ages for whatever reason. So, this is the last. DNA might work, but the samples are contaminated and fragmentary at best. Exactly. That's why I'm saying they're too deteriorated at this point to be definitive. Anyway, This is the last stream I'm going to be doing until the new year. Right now it's planned that on the 2nd, we're going to follow the Zodiac Killer. I'm going to follow the Zodiac Killer case up with Jack the Ripper. I'm going to be discussing this with somebody I guffaw over when it comes to true crime and serial killer cases. So it won't be just me. I will have a co-host. And more than likely, we're both going to be drunk. So that's going to be fun. That's slotted for the 2nd of January, but if things come up, and I'll figure it out if that's the case. But this is the last one for the new year. Dev End, you're the one that won the book. Get in contact with me and we'll figure that out. And y'all have a great rest of the new year. Have a great happy holidays. Enjoy the time with your family if you can. And I'll see you again in the new year. Sweet nightmares.